You probably don't know the name Wesley Autry. I didn't either before this week, but I don't think I will soon forget him. I don't think I will forget his name or forget his story. Wesley is a 50-year-old construction worker who lives in New York City. One morning, he was standing on a subway platform in Manhattan with his two daughters. He was taking them to school and then going on to work, when a young man who was standing on the platform began to have a seizure. Wesley turned to one of his daughters. He opened her backpack and grabbed a pen out of it that he could put between this young man's teeth to keep his jaws open, and stayed there with him. The seizure seemed to be abating, and the young man started to stand up, but the seizure continued, and he stumbled off of the platform down into between the tracks of the subway. Wesley didn't hesitate. He jumped down after him to help him out when he saw the lights of a train approaching and realized that he did not have time to pick up this young man and get him back on the platform. There was a sort of drainage trough between the tracks. Wesley pushed him down in there, and he laid down on top of him to protect him, to contain him. The train driver, of course, saw what was happening, braked as quickly as he could, but all but the last two cars of the train passed over them. The people who are the onlookers standing on the platform are screaming. There is so much noise that it was a while before anybody could hear Wesley under the train saying that they were all right. The transit authority came, they cut the power and got them out. The only remnant of this event seemed to be a smear of grease on the top of Wesley's hat. They took the young man to the hospital. Wesley refused any further treatment and went on to take his daughters to school and go to work. This sounds to me like a scene from a superhero movie done by a stuntman, or one of those commercials on TV where it says, you know, these are stunt drivers, don't try this on your own. Wesley was just an ordinary guy on the way to work who did something quite extraordinary. Journalists tracked him down, of course, afterwards, and what he said to them was, he was in trouble. I couldn't just stand there and watch. You know, there are some amazing people who have this calling to risk their lives on our behalf. There are first responders, firemen, policemen, paramedics, soldiers, Doctors Without Borders. These are the people who rush into danger when the rest of us are running away. It is their job. They go to work every day, prepared to risk their lives for others. I, for one, am very grateful for every one of them. And if you are one of them, thank God for you. You have a very special calling. But Wesley was just an ordinary guy on his way to work who literally laid down his life for someone else. Jesus' words about laying down our lives aren't just for first responders. They are for all of us. They're for you, and they're for me. Now, I hope you were all here last week to hear Larry's sermon about forgiveness. You remember the story he told you about the nursery school where they didn't teach children to say, "I'm sorry." Instead, they taught children to have empathy, to look at the consequences of what they had done, to look for solutions, and to act differently in the future. And Larry said, just saying "I'm sorry" doesn't cut it with God. Well, friends, just saying "I love you" doesn't cut it with God either. What did we hear this morning? How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses to help? What did Wesley say? He was in trouble. I couldn't just stand there and watch. Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action. What does love in action look like? What does it mean for me to lay down my life? I mean, even if I had the wherewithal to even want to be a first responder, I don't think if I go and apply to the fire department, they're going to take me. You know, how does an out-of-shape 73-year-old woman lay down her life? How does a busy mom with young children, or a business owner, or a sales rep who travels, or a student, how does a widow or a retiree or someone who is confined to their home lay down their life? Life is very precious, and life is very fragile. It can be gone in an instant. We all know that far too well. Life is this amazing and incredible gift that we have been given by God. Life is to treasure and to care for, but it's not to hoard, and it's not to throw away. It is to use to the fullest. Our lives are not our own. Our lives belong to God. We belong to God. And the first thing about laying down our lives is to give them back to God, to be used for God's purposes and not our own. It is realizing that life is not about us. It is living for something bigger than ourselves. Laying down our lives is laying down our self-interest to be God's instruments of love in the world. Laying down our lives, the prospect of it sounds pretty scary, to me anyway, but I think to most of us. It sounds like loss, and loss is a scary thing. We are afraid of certainly the physical loss of life, of death, but we're also afraid of just losing our abilities, our memory, our independence as we age. We're afraid of losing loved ones. We're afraid of the end of relationships, of being left alone, of not being included. We're afraid of losing our jobs, our source of income, our financial security. We're afraid of losing our status or position, our influence, our purpose. And we're afraid of change. We're afraid of the unknown. But you know what? We are Easter people. We are people of the resurrection. The message of Easter is that we can lay down our lives of fear. We don't need to fear death any longer. Death is not an end. It is not loss. It is a doorway into another incredible way of living. The message of Jesus is that loss is gain. If we can lay down our self-absorbed lives, it is life-giving. When we can lay down our fears, when we can lay down the things that consume us and drain us, the things that imprison us, the things that terrorize us, when we can lay down our misery and self-pity and pain and hurts, and instead turn to giving life and love and hope to someone else, we truly live. Jesus says that when we lose our lives, when we are about doing His work of love in the world, we find life. We find true, abundant life. Is laying down our lives sort of an all or nothing thing? Is it either standing there on that subway platform watching or jumping off? Laying down our lives is a way of life. It is a lifestyle that we grow into. It is every day, in every way, ways both large and small, living for something beyond ourselves. I imagine myself standing on that platform. Maybe you can imagine yourself there too. And I ask myself, what would I do? Would I jump down there to help? Honestly, I don't know. The Spirit might push me. I probably wouldn't go on my own. But if I weren't absorbed in myself, if I weren't standing there on that platform going through my cell phone and thinking about what I was going to do when I got to work, if I were present and open to what God is calling me to do right now, in the next moment, maybe I would see a step I could take. Maybe I could help Wesley. Maybe I could lay down my coat make it a pillow for this young man. Maybe I could call 911. Maybe I could try to comfort and reassure Wesley's daughters when their dad's laying there under the train. But hopefully, I could do more than just stand and watch when I saw someone in need. And you know, if I took one step, maybe the next time I saw a need, I could take a bigger step and lay down more of myself for someone else. That's something all of us can do. Every one of us, wherever we are, we can take a look around and see who around us is in need and take a step to help in some way. And together, if we each just take a step, together we could make a world of difference. So may it be. Amen.